The person who decided to distance themselves from you, the one who stepped away because the connection between you felt completely beyond their comfort, is now entering a quiet and deeply unsettling period of realization. There are very rare connections in this world that never arrive with loud announcements, dramatic moments, or unforgettable declarations of love. Instead, they appear gently, moving beneath the surface of everyday thoughts until they quietly take over everything. Before either person fully understands what is happening, the energy inside has already shifted, and something lasting has already begun. This is exactly the kind of connection that people naturally try to escape from. Not because it has no meaning, but because it carries an overwhelming power that feels impossible to ignore. It reaches places within a person that they have carefully protected for years, asking questions they never expected to face. For months, or maybe even for years, this person convinced themselves that walking away from you was the only reasonable way to survive the intensity of everything they were feeling inside. They repeated the same explanations over and over, telling themselves that stepping back was the mature decision, the practical choice, and the only way to protect their daily routine, their public image, and the organized life they had worked so hard to create. Yet, with all of their careful planning and every attempt to ignore the magnetic pull of your presence, they made one important mistake. They overlooked one simple truth that quietly remained in the background the entire time. Trying to stay away from you did not weaken the connection in any way. Instead, it made the bond even stronger. Every step they took in the opposite direction only increased its strength, making it more noticeable, more demanding, and far more difficult to push aside. Now, a quiet but incredibly deep change has taken place within them. It has left them feeling restless, curious, emotionally unsettled, and strangely powerless in the exact way that genuine emotional honesty often does. No matter how much they try to distract themselves, the feeling continues to return. Let one thing be completely clear. They did not avoid you because you meant nothing to them. That belief is far more painful than the truth itself. It creates unnecessary doubt and makes you question your own value, even though the reality is very different. People rarely walk away from something that has no meaning. More often, they step away from something that has the power to change everything they have built. They distance themselves from experiences that challenge the beliefs they have carried for years and the identity they have spent decades protecting. This connection with you was never ordinary, casual, or easy to explain. It never asked for permission before entering their life. It refused to follow familiar rules, and it never waited for approval from anyone. It simply existed on its own, beyond logic and beyond expectations. For someone who has built their entire life around control, structure, and predictability, this kind of connection can feel deeply unsettling. It asks them to trust emotions that cannot be measured or fully explained, and that alone creates fear they never expected to experience. Now they are slowly being forced to face the exact reality they tried so hard to avoid. The distance they created, the walls they carefully built, and the endless excuses they repeated to themselves did absolutely nothing to erase what they felt. Instead, that empty space created room for reflection. It allowed quiet moments to become filled with memories, unanswered questions, growing longing, and a realization they never believed they would have to face. The silence they expected to bring peace slowly became the place where the truth grew louder every single day. They see you very differently now. You are no longer simply someone they once felt attracted to. In their eyes, you have become the person who quietly changed the entire landscape of their emotional world without even trying. What they are experiencing now feels raw, undeniable, and almost impossible to explain with logic. Even so, part of them still wants to resist it. They feel trapped between the weight of what their heart already knows and the fear of stepping beyond the strict limits they spent years creating for themselves. Deep inside, they understand that some connections cannot be controlled, measured, or fully understood by the human mind. That is exactly why this experience frightens them so much. It continues to exist in the quietest corners of their awareness, showing itself during ordinary moments that seem impossible to explain. Sometimes it appears while they are driving home. Sometimes it reaches them during a conversation that has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it arrives in complete silence when there is nothing left to distract their thoughts. No matter how they try to escape it, the feeling returns again and again with quiet determination. Every attempt to replace your memory with something else has failed. Every effort to convince themselves that enough time has passed has brought only temporary relief before the same emotional pull quietly returns. They are beginning to realize that this is not something that disappears simply because they want it to. The realization has not arrived all at once. Instead, it has unfolded little by little, almost unnoticed at first. Small moments have slowly connected together until they formed one undeniable picture. The truth they avoided for so long has become impossible to ignore, and pretending otherwise requires more energy than accepting it. The more honestly they examine their own heart, the clearer everything becomes. They understand that leaving did not free them from the connection. It only forced them to carry it alone, without allowing themselves to speak about it or fully understand what it meant. That silent burden has become heavier with time. It follows them through ordinary days, through familiar routines, and through moments they once believed would help them move on. Instead of fading into the background, the connection has quietly become part of the way they see themselves and the way they experience the world around them. The more they tried to fight what they were feeling, the more they realized that their emotions became completely different whenever you were near. Their usual defenses slowly disappeared without them even noticing. It was as if the walls they had built over many years could no longer protect them from what they truly felt. Past conversations played over and over in their mind, staying with them long after each meeting had ended. Even the quiet moments you shared felt louder than words. Those silent moments reached places inside them that conversations never could. The simple fact that you were there touched something very deep within them, and that frightened them because it forced them to face a part of themselves they were not ready to accept. The strength of those emotions pushed them toward making a choice, or at least they believed they were making one. They decided to create distance, not because they did not care or because their feelings were missing, but because the connection had become much bigger than they were prepared to handle. Being close to you awakened emotions that felt almost forbidden, not in a dramatic or shocking way, but in a quiet way that disturbed the peaceful life they had carefully created. The timing did not seem right. Emotional readiness was missing from one or both sides. Family responsibilities, social expectations, personal duties, and old commitments weighed heavily on them. All of those things made the connection feel far too difficult to follow. Accepting what they truly felt would have required them to face painful truths they were still trying to avoid. Whenever they were around you, they felt completely seen. It was as if every hidden part of their heart became visible simply because you existed. You never pressured them. You never manipulated them. You never chased them emotionally or demanded anything from them. Instead, you simply remained yourself, and that honest, genuine presence made them uncomfortable in the best possible way. Your quiet authenticity disturbed the emotional balance they had spent years protecting. It slowly broke through the defensive walls they had carefully built. Before long, they realized that allowing this connection to continue without limits would force them to change parts of their life they were not ready to change. Their comfort zone, daily habits, long-standing routines, and carefully built identity suddenly felt uncertain. Everything they thought they understood about themselves seemed to be at risk if they accepted the truth of what they felt. So instead of facing those emotions directly, they chose to run from them. Avoidance became the easiest way to regain a sense of control over feelings that no longer felt safe. Pulling away became a temporary shield that helped them believe they were acting wisely, making the correct decision and protecting themselves from something they could not fully understand. Every excuse they repeated to themselves, whether it was needing more time, believing the timing was wrong, or thinking everything was simply too complicated, became another way to create distance. Those reasons helped them avoid facing the deep vulnerability that being close to you demanded. They believed those explanations were logical, yet underneath them was a fear they could not easily admit. Still, running away did not free them from anything. They were not escaping emptiness. They were trying to escape the incredible strength of a connection that felt impossible to explain or control. It was something real, honest, and deeply human. No matter how hard they tried, they could not simply ignore it or pretend it had disappeared. The strange truth about a connection like this is that resisting it often makes it even stronger. Every attempt to suppress those feelings only gave them more power. The harder they tried to stay in control, the clearer their emotions became. They started noticing the smallest details that once seemed unimportant, but now stayed with them for days. Tiny moments became unforgettable. A brief glance, a soft smile, or the natural warmth in your voice without expecting anything in return stayed in their memory far longer than they expected. Those simple moments echoed through their thoughts, returning again and again even when they wanted to focus on something else. Each act of avoidance only made your presence feel more important. Instead of creating emotional distance, it increased their fascination, deep longing, and quiet fear. They found themselves caught between wanting to move forward and wanting to protect the life they already knew. That inner conflict became harder to ignore with every passing day. The bond remained mostly silent and unspoken, yet it became impossible to deny. In many ways, it grew stronger because it had been resisted for so long. They believed that creating distance would eventually reduce the emotional pull, restore their sense of balance, and allow them to forget everything they had been feeling. They honestly believed that stepping away, removing themselves from your world, and pretending the connection did not exist would restore order to their carefully organized life. But something completely unexpected happened instead. The harder they tried to stay away from you, the more often you appeared in their thoughts. Memories surfaced without warning, emotions returned without permission, and random reminders appeared throughout ordinary days with surprising clarity. Even during moments when they expected to feel relief, peace, or emotional freedom, your presence remained with them like a quiet shadow. It gently reminded them of the truth they had worked so hard to escape. No matter how much they distracted themselves, those feelings refused to disappear completely. In the middle of all that distance, your image settled deeply into their mind in ways they never expected. You began appearing in songs, familiar places, passing conversations, and ordinary moments that suddenly carried new meaning. They could not understand why simple things kept reminding them of you, but every reminder quietly brought the same emotions back to the surface, proving that some connections cannot simply be left behind. That was when emotions they believed had faded long ago quietly began to return. They appeared during peaceful moments when they expected to feel calm, and even in the smallest parts of everyday life that suddenly carried a surprising amount of emotional meaning. The habit of avoiding everything, which they once believed was the smartest choice, slowly stopped giving them the comfort they expected. That was the moment the realization started to take shape inside them. It did not arrive all at once. Instead, it grew little by little, reaching far deeper than any logical explanation ever could. They finally understood that it was never only about losing you. It was about losing a part of themselves. Every decision to create distance and every effort to push down their emotions slowly disconnected them from a truth that they were only now ready to accept. They had spent so much time trying to protect themselves that they had also separated themselves from something deeply meaningful. This realization did not come like a sudden flash of light. It unfolded quietly in the spaces between ordinary days, in the silent ache of loneliness they could not fully explain, and in moments that somehow felt incomplete without you. They noticed it in relationships that once seemed satisfying but now felt strangely empty. They also noticed it in personal successes that should have made them happy, but instead left them feeling as though something important was missing. Slowly, they began asking themselves the questions they had avoided for so long. Why did everything feel different now? Why did thoughts of you continue to appear every day? Why did life without you seem quieter, smaller, and somehow less meaningful than before? As this awareness continued to grow, they finally recognized the truth. They had never been distracted by your presence. Instead, your presence had awakened something inside them. You were never just a passing attraction, a brief distraction, or a mistake they needed to forget. You became something much deeper. You reflected back a version of themselves that felt genuine, emotionally alive, and completely real. Whenever they were with you, the walls they had spent years building slowly began to fall apart. Looking back now, they understand that walking away was never an act of wisdom or careful thinking. It became a quiet act of abandoning themselves. While trying to avoid you, they unknowingly walked away from the version of themselves they had always hoped to become. You revealed someone who could be honest, present, and capable of deep emotional connection. Now that they finally face the truth, they cannot ignore the reflection you showed them. They cannot dismiss it, and they cannot erase it from their memory. That version of themselves remains impossible to forget. The realization arrived slowly, like sunlight finally breaking through clouds after a long storm. They now see with remarkable clarity what their avoidance truly created. The distance they believed would protect them never actually protected anything. It only delayed the moment they would eventually have to face the truth. They finally understand that avoidance was never a shield. It only postponed an awakening that was always waiting for them. That awakening is both humbling and life-changing. Within this quiet understanding, they recognize that you were never someone to fear or resist. You were simply the person who helped shine light on the parts of themselves they had been too afraid to see. Now they understand why your presence always felt different. They know why every conversation stayed in their thoughts long after it ended. They also understand why no one else has touched their heart in quite the same way since then. The powerful emotions they experienced were never caused by forbidden circumstances alone. Instead, those emotions made the connection feel impossible to ignore. It reached beyond the safe limits they had carefully built around their life because it threatened to awaken a future they had never been brave enough to live. Now, during quiet moments of reflection, they carry feelings they cannot easily release. It is not loud or dramatic longing. It is a gentle but constant awareness. It is not obsessive thinking, but a quiet sense of regret that stays with them. These emotions are difficult to describe, yet impossible to ignore. They feel guilt for leaving without offering an explanation. They wonder who you have become. They also carry a growing fear that they may have missed the opportunity they once had. Alongside those feelings remains a small but genuine hope that perhaps everything has not been lost forever. More than anything else, they now feel deep respect for you. They recognize the strength you showed, the patience you carried, the dignity you maintained, and the way you refused to chase or beg for their attention. Your ability to give space without bitterness and to accept distance without resentment left a lasting impression they cannot forget. A part of them now understands they were standing in front of something mature, wise, and deeply steady. Your presence completely changed the way they think about connection, respect, emotional honesty, and self-awareness. Why is this realization appearing only now? Moments of deep understanding rarely arrive during the busiest seasons of life. They usually appear when everything becomes quiet, when distractions fade away, and when daily routines slow down enough for hidden truths to rise to the surface. Something in their life has changed. Something has disappointed them, ended unexpectedly, or forced them to stop moving forward without thinking. That pause gave them no choice except to sit with the feelings they had spent so long avoiding. In that silence, thoughts of you returned with surprising clarity. They could no longer escape the truth they had once tried so hard to avoid. They did not step away because the connection was wrong. They stepped away because it was completely real. Once a truth like that is fully recognized, it can never be unseen, forgotten, or undone. Here is the part that matters most. You did not lose this connection. What truly happened was growth. You outgrew the version of them that was ruled by fear, the version that could not fully meet you where you stood, and the version that chose to run instead of facing the depth of what you offered. Whether they reach out to you one day or remain completely silent, one thing has already changed forever. Your presence left a mark on them that cannot be erased. You became a turning point in their journey, a quiet wake-up call, and an important lesson that unfolded naturally without demanding attention. Even if they never expected it, meeting you shifted something deep inside them. This is where your quiet strength becomes clear. The space you continue to hold, the calm way you carry yourself, and the emotional maturity you showed have created a lasting impression. If they ever decide to return, it will not be from fear, confusion, or avoidance. It will come from a place of humility, awareness, and genuine respect. And if they never return, that does not lessen your influence. The lesson you inspired continues to shape them from within, whether they speak about it or not. There is one more truth worth remembering. Some connections are never meant to move quickly. They unfold in their own time, guided by reflection, emotional growth, and deeper understanding. They cannot be forced or controlled. Instead, they develop slowly, revealing their meaning only when both people are ready to see it. You have never been invisible in this story. Your presence has already changed the emotional landscape of their life, whether they openly admit it or quietly keep it to themselves. The feelings they carry today, the quiet respect, the lasting awareness, and the growing appreciation for your strength are all signs of a bond that reaches beyond timing, distance, or circumstance. In every possible way, you were never someone who could simply disappear from their memory. You became a catalyst for change, a mirror that reflected hidden truths, and a presence that permanently changed the way they understand connection, choice, and even themselves. Some awakenings arrive much later than expected, but when they do, they carry a depth that early understanding could never match. Time has a remarkable way of slowing everything down. It creates space for reflection and reveals truths that remain hidden during the busy pace of everyday life. Sometimes, the person who seemed to avoid you, who looked as though they were walking away without looking back, was never truly rejecting you in the way it appeared. Instead, they were running from the version of themselves that was capable of loving openly, trusting deeply, and living without fear or pretending to be someone else. They were escaping the courage, vulnerability, and honesty that your presence quietly reflected back to them. Now, after all the silence, all the distance, and every attempt to ignore those emotions, they finally understand what they had been trying to escape. They finally recognized the truth they spent so much energy avoiding. What they were hiding from was not you. It was the reality of their own heart that became visible whenever they were with you. The person who stepped away was never rejecting your value. They were struggling with an internal truth they simply were not prepared to face at that time. The connection felt intense because it reached beyond their carefully built identity. Every conversation, every shared glance, and every silent moment together revealed something within them they had spent years trying to keep hidden. Your presence gently uncovered emotions they had buried beneath routines, responsibilities, expectations, and carefully controlled habits. This was never about indifference. It was about the fear of becoming emotionally vulnerable. It was the fear of change, the fear of uncertainty, and the fear of meeting a version of themselves they had ignored for years. The distance they created was never a measure of your worth. Instead, it reflected the confusion and inner conflict that your presence brought into the light. While trying to protect themselves, they believed creating distance would weaken the connection. They hoped that stepping away would quiet the emotions they could not explain. But the human heart does not always follow logic. The more they resisted those feelings, the more often their thoughts returned to you. Unexpected memories began appearing during ordinary moments. A familiar song reminded them of a conversation. A simple place brought back a forgotten memory. Even quiet evenings seemed to carry your presence without warning. Again and again, they felt a gentle pull that could not be explained away with reason alone. Avoiding the connection never erased it. Instead, it made its importance even clearer. The silence gave them more time to think, more opportunities to reflect, and more reasons to question why those emotions refused to disappear. Even without realizing it, they slowly began seeing themselves differently. They started recognizing patterns in their own behavior that had remained hidden for years. They saw how often fear had influenced their decisions. They noticed how frequently they had mistaken emotional distance for strength. Little by little, they realized that many of the qualities they admired in you were actually qualities they had been longing to develop within themselves. The honesty you lived with, the courage you displayed, and the emotional openness you carried became reflections of the person they secretly wanted to become. You never demanded anything from them. You never chased them or tried to manipulate their choices. You simply remained true to yourself, and that simple authenticity became impossible for them to ignore. Your presence quietly challenged everything they believed about themselves. The silence, the distance, and the avoidance never protected them from those truths. They only delayed the moment when they would finally have to face them. That awakening often arrives without drama. It appears during moments of loss, quiet reflection, or unexpected stillness when life slows down enough to reveal everything they had been trying not to see. It is not sudden or overwhelming. It grows gradually, becoming clearer with each passing day until it can no longer be denied. They begin noticing it in relationships that no longer satisfy them, in achievements that fail to bring lasting happiness, and in quiet moments when nothing seems capable of filling the space left behind. Slowly, the understanding becomes impossible to ignore. The connection never felt forbidden because it was wrong. It felt overwhelming because it was real. It invited them toward a life they were not emotionally prepared to live. They did not truly lose you. Instead, for a time, they lost themselves in the fear of facing emotions that felt deeper than anything they had experienced before. Now they carry feelings they cannot easily explain. It is not desperate longing or constant obsession. It is a calm awareness, a quiet curiosity, and a gentle regret that remains present beneath the surface. Along with those feelings comes genuine respect for your patience, your strength, your calm dignity, and your decision not to chase or demand answers. They now understand that what they walked away from was never just another relationship or another passing connection. It became a mirror reflecting a part of themselves they had been too afraid to accept. Whether they choose to return or remain silent forever, that reflection will continue living within them. It has already changed the direction of their life, just as it has influenced yours. Some connections are never meant to be rushed. They unfold naturally, step by step, guided by awareness instead of fear and by emotional growth instead of avoidance. Your place in this story has never been about control or obligation. It has always been about authenticity, quiet confidence, and emotional presence. The person who once avoided you is now experiencing the awakening that your presence inspired. Whether they ever act upon it or not, the transformation has already begun and its impact will remain with them for the rest of their life.